Good evening, and welcome to My Riches of the Parsha. Tonight is Thursday night, October 23rd, 2025. So, what does it mean to have faith? What does it mean to have faith in God or trust in God? So, often when people say that, they mean, don't worry, have faith in God. It's going to be okay. Trust God to take care of it. You're facing something and you're afraid and you're anxious. So somebody says to you, don't worry, have faith. You'll see it's going to be fine. Have faith in God. It's meant to be, I think for most people, it's meant to be a positive, encouraging message to give to a person. The problem is I don't think that's correct. I don't think it's authentically Jewish. Because just believing that something will turn out well does not lead to it turning out well, no matter how often people say it. Rather, having faith or trust in God means that whatever happens, it will proceed according to God's plan, and it will be good for us from God's perspective, not from ours necessarily. It will be good from God's perspective even if we don't see it, or if we only see it years later, or we don't see it at all. But that is authentically what Jewish faith is. Now, I've shared this with you before. The classic expression of the statement of faith, the classic expression is the passage in Tehillim, famous Psalm 23, Chaf Gimel, Hashem roi lo echzar, God is my shepherd, I shall not want. God loves us, God takes care of us, God cares about us. And then the famous verse, Gam ki elech begeitz hamavas, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, lo ira ra, I do not fear evil, I do not fear bad, ki ata imadi, because you're with me. That does not mean that nothing bad will happen. Lo ira ra, nothing will be called bad, doesn't mean being saved from pain. Doesn't mean being saved from suffering. It means that God will be with us. Lo ira ra, I'm not afraid because God is standing next to me. So something terrible might happen, God forbid, but I know that God is beside me and we're going through this together. There is pain, but at least it's not ra, it's not bad, because I'm not alone. Whatever happens, I'm not alone. That is an authentic statement, I believe, of faith in God from a Jewish point of view. However, there's another kind of faith in God, trust in God, a very, very different kind of faith in our Torah portion. The Parsha of Noach, this Shabbos we read Noach, the story of Noah and the ark and the flood. And I think that this is terribly relevant to every single one of us today. Okay, so listen to these verses, just a few verses from near the beginning of the Torah portion. God says to Noah, V'anochi hine mevi es hamabul, I'm going to bring, God says, a flood on the world. L'shaches kol basar, every single living thing will be destroyed. Vayomer Hashem l'Noach, and God says to Noach, I'm sorry, I skipped a line, I'm sorry. Vayas Noach, kechol asher tziva oso Elokim kenasa. So God commanded Noah to build an ark and gave him the dimensions. And the Torah says Noach did everything that God said exactly as God had said it. It's fantastic. All right. It took time to build, but finally it was time. The ark was finished, and the flood, the rain was supposed to start, the flood. Vayomer Hashem leNoach, God says to Noach, Bo ata v'chol beischa el hateva. Now's the time for you and your family to go into the ark, because, as I told you at the beginning, there's going to be this flood. It's going to destroy every living creature. Vayas Noach k'chol asher tzivo Hashem. Again, and Noach did everything that God commanded. Next pasuk. V'hamabel hayamayim al haaretz. So it started. The rain started, and it started to flood. And it's rising, and it's rising. And then the next verse, last one I'm going to read. Vayavo Noach, and Noach and his family went into the teva, into the ark, mipnei mehamabel, because of the waters of the flood. Okay. But our sages, of course, read this very, very carefully. And Rashi focuses on the last three words. The last three words that I read. Noah went into the ark because of the waters of the flood. Wait a second. Wait a second. If God told Noah that it was going to happen, and God commanded him to build the ark and gather the animals and enter, God says, enter. And the Torah says twice, Noach did exactly and completely what God told him to do. Then why did he go into the ark, mipnei mehamabel, because of the waters of the flood? Why didn't he just go into the ark, kasher tziva Hashem es Noach, as God had commanded him, like it already says 2 times before? There's an inference that it was the waters of the flood that pushed Noah into the ark, not just the command of God. And Rashi says this. Rashi says, Af Noach miktane emunah. Noach did not have complete faith. Mamin ve'eno mamin. He believed, but at the same time he did not believe. Shiava hamabel, that the flood would come. V'lo nichnas l'teva, and therefore he did not enter the ark ad shedachahu hamayim, until the water was rising and he had to go into the ark. And that's the reason that the pasuk says mipnei mehamabel, because Noach was waiting to make sure. It is, in other words, Noach was 99% certain, 99% certain that there was going to be a flood, because God said it. God says it. I mean, it's going to happen. God had told them it's going to happen. But maybe, just in case, he waited till he saw the waters rise with his own eyes. Now, I think that this makes Noach very relatable to us, because even the most, in quotation marks, religious person still has doubts. And that's to be expected, especially in Noach's unprecedented circumstance, right? This had never happened before, and it has never happened since. So it is certainly understandable for Noach to just want to see it with his own eyes. But here's the radical insight. And I saw this insight from an article written by Avi Killip, a wonderful, wonderful article I saw a number of years ago. Avi Killip. He was a mamin. He was a believer. He had faith in God. Rashi says he was a mamin. But his faith was not, I have faith that everything is going to be okay. I have faith that's going to work out and be just fine for everybody. On the contrary, Noach's faith is that the absolute worst that God tells him will happen. The world will be destroyed. Noach has faith in that. And Noach is 99% sure that the entire world, besides him and the animals, the entire world will be destroyed. 99%. But there was 1% that Noach thought maybe God changed his mind, maybe God had mercy, maybe God will wait a while. 1%. I mean, obviously, God told him to do this. God told him to get into the ark. So that was the last minute. But he was 99% sure that the absolute worst would happen. And he's held accountable for the remote possibility that everything will be okay. You have a 1% thought in your mind that everything's going to work out okay. That is not having faith in God. Because God said there's going to be a flood and destroy everything. That's the weakness in his faith. That's why Rashi says, Mamin, he was a believer, he had faith, ve'eno mamin, and he was a non-believer. But it's just the opposite of what we normally think. His faith was that it would be the worst that it could possibly be, but he's criticized for having a little bit of an idea in his mind that maybe somehow it's going to work out. Just the opposite of what we often think about when we think about what does it mean to have faith. This is an article from a few years ago. It was in the New York Times. It was written by Farhad Manjoo. And he is discussing climate change. He lives in California. And he talks about the earthquakes and the landslides and the floods and the fires. We are BlackBerry after the iPhone, Blockbuster after Netflix. We've got the wrong design. We bet on the wrong technologies. We've got the wrong incentives, and we're saddled with the wrong culture. Our whole way of life is built on a series of myths. The myth of endless space, endless fuel, endless water, endless optimism, endless outward reach, and endless free parking. But those are myths. He writes, one by one, those myths are burning into flame. No, our energy is not unlimited. Our water is not unlimited. Our space is not unlimited. None of those things are true. And of course, that was 2019. And of course, it's gotten a lot worse since then. I read an article. It was an in-depth article, fascinating, about the future of recycling. Recycling is very important. Whatever else I say, don't take from this that I'm saying recycling is not important. It's important. You got to do it. I do it. You have to do it. It's a Jewish requirement. However, here are the statistics. People in general are recycling more and more. The rate of recycling goes up, which is great. That's fantastic news. And for some materials, this is a significant improvement for the earth. But recycling plastic, I know that we're all sitting in front of plastic right now, so please don't take this personally in any way. In terms of recycling plastic, it is a depressing and demoralizing failure. Listen to this. of the plastic that we laboriously put into the recycling bins. So we already have a couple of steps, right? You use plastic, but you're going to put it into a bin for recycling. Only 5% of that is actually usably recycled. 5%. And God, in the Torah, explicitly says this exact phenomenon many times in the Torah, in many ways, that we have an obligation to take care of the earth. Many mitzvos. I once gave a lecture series on this. It lasted, I think, 8 weeks, on all the different mitzvos that relate to how we treat the environment. So I'll just share just a couple of short things. Our most brief and concise and complete expression of the attitude that we have to caring about the environment is famous phrase in Tehillim and Psalms, La Hashem ha'aretz umloa. To God belongs the earth and everything in it. Which means, say our sages, to misuse the earth is to steal it. It belongs to God. It's not yours. God gives us the privilege to use it if we use it in the right way. Last week we read in Bereshis, Vayikach Hashem Elokim es Adam, and God took Adam and Eve, Vayinechuhu b'gan Eden, and placed them in the Garden of Eden. We know they didn't stay so long, but God placed them in the Garden of Eden, la'avda u'l'shamra, to work it and to protect it. To work it and to protect it. What does that mean? So listen, please, to these words. This is from the Medrash. And this is something that we need to repeat over and over and over again. And this is really, again, this is a paragraph, but it must be our attitude towards this entire subject. When God created Adam and Eve, and he placed them in the Garden of Eden, he took them on a tour. You go to a new place, you wanna see what's there. And he showed them every beautiful tree and plant. Everything was there. And it was so beautiful. And God says to Adam and Eve, Va'amale re'ei masai, look at what I've created. How beautiful they are, how valuable they are. All the trees, all the animals, everything that I created. It's so beautiful. It's so valuable. Tein daitacha, be careful. Shelo tekalkel v'tacharev es olami, that you do not mess up or destroy my earth. She'im tekalkel, because if you destroy it, if you mess it up, ein mi she'yitaken acharecha, no one's going to come along and fix it for you. No one's going to come along and fix it for you. There's no one to fix it but ourselves. Now, I want to confess something. There's a lot that I do not understand about the crisis of climate change. For example, I don't exactly understand what would actually help and what is more symbolic. I don't completely understand what is realistic to achieve and what is not. And a big part of what I don't understand, and I really think that this is shared by a lot of people, is because so few people approach this looking for the truth without an agenda. Most people who talk publicly about the environment, whether on either side of this or anywhere on the spectrum, most people have an agenda. You're either pro the environment, you're against the environment. You have an agenda. To find someone who's objective, like the doctors that worked for the tobacco companies years ago. But to find someone who's objective, it's not so easy. There's one thing I am confident in, one thing I have certainty about. And this week's reading of the Parsha of Noach should reinforce this for all of us in order to share Noach's faith, trust that the absolute worst is happening. And it will not be okay without our most intense effort and investment to change. I try to imagine if Noach would appear today and look at our world. And I think the first thing he would say is, I bet not again, not again. And then he would say to us, have faith, have trust, have my kind of faith that it's a fact we are destroying our world. And there is no one to fix it but ourselves. I think Noach would add, and also have faith that you can fix it. Because we can. It requires a lot more effort than we're giving now, a lot more expense, a lot more of making it a top priority, but it is possible. We can. And therefore we must. Okay. I assume that most people have seen a rainbow. You've seen a rainbow? I've seen a rainbow. It's beautiful. A rainbow is in my opinion, one of the most beautiful natural phenomenon in the world. Is there a more beautiful natural phenomenon? Okay, we can make a list of top 5, but a rainbow's got to be in there. Now, I understand that a rainbow is a natural phenomenon. It is a prism effect of water droplets in the air after it rains. But for us Jews, the rainbow is also something that is much, much deeper. And when you see a rainbow, it is such a special thing that we say a bracha. There is a bracha, a blessing to recite when you see a rainbow. And the bracha goes as follows. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you God, Elokeinu melech haolam, master of the universe. Zocher habris, you remember your promise. V'nemam bivriso, and your promise is faithful. That is, we can rely on your promise. V'kayem b'ma'amaro, and you fulfill the words that you say. And that bracha is a reference to our Torah portion. Because when Noach and his family and the animals came out of the ark, we will read this Shabbos. Vayomer Hashem el libo, and God said to God's self, that is literally in his heart, but God said, Lo osif lekalel od es ha'adama bavur ha'adam. I will never again, God says, destroy the entire world by flood, because I recognize ki ha'adam, because human beings, Ki yetzer lev ha'adam ra min urav. Human beings will always have temptation. Human beings will always make mistakes. I created them, God says. I know I created them to be imperfect. Vayomer Lakim leNoach. And then God says to Noah, Vakimosi es brisi itchem. I am going to make a promise to you that there will never again be a flood that will destroy all the creatures on the earth. Vayomer Lakim. And God says to Noach, Zos os habris. This is the sign of the promise that I'm making. Es kashti nasati ba'anan. That I will place from time to time a rainbow in the clouds in the sky. In other words, a keshes, a rainbow, appears when God would want to destroy the entire world, God forbid, but he remembers the promise that he made. And he does not destroy it. So that explains the words of the bracha. Zocher abris, God, thank you so much. You're remembering your promise, and you keep your promise. And I see that's the sign that you keep your promise. And every time we see a rainbow, and every time we make this bracha, our sages, by wording the bracha in this manner, they are telling us they want us to remember this. God does it not for God's self. God does it for us to see it, to send a message. So that means it's not so good to see a rainbow. So now how would you feel about seeing a rainbow? The Gemara says, the Talmud says that in a few very righteous generations, how righteous were they? There was no rainbow in their lifetime. Okay, all right, well, I'll never look at a rainbow the same way. But here's the question that I have. If that's what the message is, why is it so beautiful? Why would God design a message to the entire world that you're so bad that I would want to destroy all of you? I mean, if that's the message, why do you make it so beautiful? Why do you make it that everyone loves seeing a rainbow? So I'm going to share with you an approach. I find that following business news is fascinating. I'm in a nonprofit organization, so I'm in that kind of a business, but I don't have any experience in corporate life, for example. But I find that there's so much to learn from the world of business. So there used to be a weekly column in the New York Times, and the title of the column was Corner Office. And each week they would profile a successful CEO, and they would ask him, what is your management style? What lessons did you learn? And I found those columns just fascinating. The world of business, the corporate world, in certain senses, is fascinating in what you can learn from it, what to do and what not to do, both ways. Dan Schneider was the CEO of SIB Development and Consulting. I've never heard of him. I've never heard of the company. I don't know anything about it. I know that it's very, very successful. Dan, I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Don, not Dan, Don, I'm sorry. Don started a company, another company, and it grew until it had $35 million of annual revenue. He sold that company and started a new company, and he has 25 employees, and 6 million in revenue. Excuse me, I'm making mistakes tonight. I apologize. 6 billion with a B in revenues. $6 billion. So the New York Times interviewed him, and they asked the following question, because he had a career when he was younger and sold it at a great profit, and he took some time off, and then he started this other company. It's become so successful. So how did your leadership and management style change in the new business compared with when you were younger? That's the question. Listen to this. In the beginning, I would scream and yell and throw things. I was hot-headed, and it was stressful. And it was the same thing with my next company, because that's what worked before. I was your stereotypical lunatic CEO. And it wasn't like I was trying to be that way. That was natural. So when I started this company, this was after he had taken some time off, I'd become more laid back. I'd become more relaxed. I just handle things differently. I don't get upset. I don't really yell anymore because it accomplishes nothing. So they ask him, what made you realize that? I mean, that's a pretty gigantic shift. What made you realize that? He says, I don't know. I couldn't say the one turning point that made me realize it, but there were moments. And he tells the following story. We had an employee who was working on a project for a Fortune 5 company, a major project, and this is a major corporation. He'd been working on it for a month, compiling data, and he did not back up his hard drive. And his hard drive fried. A month's worth of data, a month's worth of work, gone. When that happened, everyone looked at me. All the employees who were there, they looked at me, and they thought that I was either going to fire him or kill him, or perhaps both. Perhaps both. And I don't know where I got the idea, but I just said to this employee, you've got to go buy everyone ice cream because we're having an ice cream party. Because I realized that if I yell at everybody, they're just going to figure I'm a jerk. But if we're all sitting around eating ice cream, everyone knows why we're eating ice cream, because this guy messed up. And that will set in. And they'll remember it. And then maybe they'll just think to themselves, yeah, we had ice cream last week. Maybe we should remember to back up our work. And he says, since then, we have not had to recover any more hard drives. God could yell and scream when God's upset, like a lot of bosses. And sometimes God does that. But God is much smarter. When God is displeased or disappointed, God sends us two messages, one wrapped inside of the other. One message is, I'm displeased. I'm disappointed in you. And the other message is, I will communicate this to you by showing you how important you are to me, how much I love you. I will express my displeasure with ice cream, with the most beautiful sight that this world has to offer. That's the message of the rainbow. I think this is one of the hardest jobs of a parent, to give guidance and discipline to our children, but to do it with love, to do it with ice cream, and the same thing with a boss, the same thing with a teacher, and for sure the same thing for a rabbi. There are many parents who do not parent. No limits. I want to be your friend. I want to be your pal. I don't say no. And there are many parents who discipline their children when they are angry and they lose their temper. To do it, to discipline your children or any of the other scenarios, and to do it with ice cream, that's the message that God wants us to get from the rainbow. So the next time you see a rainbow, find a siddur, look up the bracha, and say it with the realization of the dual message this inspiring and beautiful sight is supposed to teach us. Okay. I have one more piece to share. But this one is a little bit complicated. It starts out complicated, but I'm telling you, if you hold cup, if you follow with me, when we get to the end, I think you're going to see that this is magnificent. What I'm going to share now is largely based on an essay by the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks. Okay, imagine two people arrested. Okay, two people arrested by the police on suspicion that one of them, on suspicion of committing a crime. I'm sorry, on suspicion of committing a crime. But the police have insufficient evidence to arrest them on a serious charge. They only have enough to arrest them on a minor infraction. But the police want to be able to find the real criminal and to give them a serious punishment. So here's what they do. The police put the two men in separate rooms. And in each of the rooms, the interrogator urges that person to inform on the other. Just tell us the other guy's guilty. And they do that to both of them in separate rooms. Now, here's where you have to hold cup. So here's what the police say. The police give, or there are 4 options when this happens. There are 4 possibilities. Number 1, they could say, if you testify against the other suspect, and that means we're going to be able to give the other guy a serious punishment, you're going to go free. And he is going to be in prison for 10 years. Wow. Number 2, the second possibility. If he testifies you in the other room and you remain silent, you're going to prison for 10 years. He's going to go free because he testified against you. Number 3, if both of you testify against one another, each of you will receive a 5-year sentence. That's number 3. And here's number 4. If you both stay silent, you will each be convicted of a lesser charge and you will each serve 1 year in prison. 4 options. Okay, let's make sure that we understand this. Option number 1, you testify against the other guy. Option number 2, he testifies against you and you don't say anything. Option number 3, you both testify against each other. Option 4, you both stay silent. By the way, this is called, there's a name for this. It's called the prisoner's dilemma. And this is one example of kind of a famous discussion in logic and philosophy. Prisoner's dilemma. Now, let's think about what's the best option. Well, clearly, the best outcome for them is number 4. We each serve 1 year. That's fantastic. There's no gambling. There's no possibility of 5 years. There's no possibility of 10 years. That's what That's what would lead to the best outcome for the two of them, not necessarily for the police, but for the two of them. But they won't do that. They will not choose option 4. Research shows that they will not choose it. They will choose, and it's clear cut in the research, they will choose option number 3. Option number 3, again, you both testify against each other, and you're both going to get a 5-year sentence. Now that, in fact, is what happens in the majority of cases. The question is why? Why don't they go for number 4? Why don't they just both stay silent and they'll both get only 1 year? So this leads to a classic theory in economics, and that is that each person acts in their own best interest. But if that's true, each person should make the decision for themselves of number 4. That's what is the best for them. But people don't. Why? There was a man named John van Neumann, and in 1944, he developed what is known today as the game theory. The game theory is a fascinating subject, many, many applications. But in this case, here's how it goes. Game theory. The outcome of my decision depends on somebody else's response. And I can't predict that. That is, I'm sitting alone in the room. Police are questioning me. If I would know that the other guy in the other room is going to do the same, I would keep silent. But I have no way of knowing what the other guy's going to do. Maybe he wants the deal for himself. Maybe he wants to testify against me and he'll go free. No telling. So if I don't know what the other guy is thinking, and I don't know what the other guy is saying, then my best choice is number 3. We'll each take 5 years. Because I don't want to risk 10 years. And I don't want to hope for 1 year or going free based on somebody else making a decision that I don't know about. Who knows what that guy's going to say? Maybe he's a crook. Maybe he's a liar. So therefore, he says to himself, each person will say to themselves, my best strategy for me is number 3. Even though really it's not the best outcome for each of them. Okay. Now we're getting to the heart of it. In other words, if we work together, we could have a better outcome for each of us. Of course, that's only for the criminals, right? The police want to keep them separate. But this concept applies in every area of life. If people cooperate and they work together, okay, that's nice, it's moral, but it's more than that. When people trust and cooperate with each other, each one can do better for themselves, to make a better decision for themselves. If I trusted that that guy was going to stay silent, if I really trusted and believed in that, then I would do the same and stay silent. And that would really be better for me. That is, if I had more trust in him, which is a moral statement, it would be better for me. 1 year instead of 5 years. Games theory is scientific proof in the objective benefit of morality. Morality pays off. Morality, being moral, is good for you. This is the end of this week's Torah portion. And this is after the flood. The world has been repopulated, and everyone in the world spoke one language, and they spoke in one way. And they found a valley, and they settled there. And one person said to another, let's take bricks and we'll build a tower. It'll go all the way up to the sky. So the Torah says, excuse me. So the Torah says, so God descended to see what's going on with this tower. We spoke once about the meaning of that word descended in this context. We'll leave that for now. Vayomer Hashem, and God said, Hein am echad v'safa achas l'kulam. They all speak the same language. They're all working together. So what God says is, Havanerda v'navla sham sfasam. I'm going to go down to earth, and I'm going to confuse their language. Asher lo yishmu isfash reyehu. Everyone's going to speak a different language. One person's in English, one person's Spanish, one person's in Russian. Vayafetz Hashem osam misham al pnei kol haaretz. And then God spread them out over the entire world. Because all of civilization, which at that time was limited, it's a few generations after the flood, they're all living together in this valley. God spreads them over the whole world. Alkain Karashma Bavel. That's where the word Bavel, Babylonia, comes from. Kisham Balal Hashem Svas Kol Haaretz. The word Bavel, as a Hebrew word, means to mix up, to have things confused and chaotic. It's a little bit like the English word babble, like when a person babbles on it. It's like confused. One thing's together with another. Each one doesn't understand each other. And God spread them out over the entire world. So here's the question. Abarbanel, who was a great scholar, among other things, lived over 500 years ago. 500 years before games theory. And what he says is based on the verse just before what I read to you. The verse just before says as follows: V'kush yolad es Nimrod. Cush and his wife gave birth to Nimrod, who hechel lios gibor ba'aretz. And Nimrod began to be a great and mighty person in the land. It's an interesting phenomenon that the name Nimrod, which at least in classic Jewish understanding was a very evil person, as I will describe to you, it has actually become quite a popular name in Israel. There are quite a lot of people that name their sons Nimrod. And not only that, but there is a very, very famous brand of sandals. They used to be, I don't know how to explain it, like the classic Israeli sandals. There was only, in the olden days, there was only one style. You wanted sandals, here it is. This is just show us which size. It doesn't take long. I had a pair of Nimrods. They lasted about 20 years. Okay, Nimrod. All right. Nimrod. I lost a page of my notes. I think we'll get through it. Says the Abarbanel over 500 years ago. You know what Nimrod was? He was Leo's Gibor Ba'aretz. He was the most powerful in the land. Nimrod was a tyrant. Nimrod worked to abolish human equality. Nimrod is, in fact, the first instance of oppression of the weak by the mighty. And Abarbanel says that Nimrod was responsible for Migdal Bavel, for the Tower of Babel. Listen to what our rabbis say. This is the attitude of the people at that time. Because, again, we read this narrative. It's very short. It's so bizarre to us. Like, what did they do wrong? They're all speaking together. They're all cooperating. They're all working together. It sounds great. Why would God be upset with that and overturn it? Because it was not so pleasant, says the Abarbanel. Because Nimrod was a tyrant and he treated everyone as subhuman. Listen to this. Our sages are describing the attitude that people had at that time. Im nafal adam v'mei. So they're building a tower. So they have, I guess, scaffolding as they're going higher and higher. If a person would fall off and be killed, lo hayu samim lev alav, they wouldn't pay any attention. Another one gone. V'im nafla lavana achas. But if a brick would fall down, oh my goodness, they would sit and they would cry, and they would say, Oy lanu, woe is to us. When are we going to get another brick like this? Oh my goodness, we're lost. This was a society of tyranny. A society where people were subjugated and treated as tools. A society where there is no real cooperation or trust, because everyone is suspicious of everyone else. Everyone is being used by this tyrant. And such a society cannot flourish. This is really the essence of the writing of Dr. Putnam and the classic book, Bowling Alone, that societies flourish based on the amount of what he calls social capital. But it's exactly this, the amount to which people trust each other, the amount to which people feel that they can rely on each other. That society flourishes. And whenever there's a society where everyone is mistrustful of each other, where everyone does not have faith in the goodwill of the other, those societies wither and die. And that is one of the most important discoveries of the 20th century, games theory. But that is precisely what the Torah is teaching us in a lesson from over 3,500 years ago. There is an objective benefit for each of us to develop trust and cooperation with each other, to develop equality among people, and to develop morality. Not just because it's good for society, which it is. It's also good for me. It makes my life better. And that's the lesson we are to take from this cryptic story of the Tower of Babel. My friends, I want you to have a great evening and a beautiful Shabbos. And I look forward to seeing you soon in person.